Greetings from Cosmos Foundations. This is Nabila Rahman, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome you all on behalf of Cosmos Foundation on the Cosmos Dialogue series on Bangladesh-Nordic relations, Prognosis for the Future. Today, we will commence with opening remarks from Mr. Inayatullah Khan, founder, Cosmos Group, chairman of Cosmos Foundation, who will then hand it over to our chair, Dr. Iftikhar Ahmed Chaudhry, President and Distinguished Fellow, Cosmos Foundation, former Bangladesh Foreign Affairs Advisor, to deliver his remarks. The keynote address will be delivered by three keynote speakers. Her Excellency Alexander Berg von Lind, Ambassador of Sweden to Bangladesh, His Excellency Espen Richter Svensson, Ambassador of Norway to Bangladesh, Her Excellency Winnie Estrup Peterson, Ambassador of Denmark to Bangladesh. Additionally, we have our distinguished discussants today who will be joining the webinar as follows. Professor Dr. Imtiaz Ahmed, Department of International Relations, University of Dhaka. Professor Dr. Lailufer Yasmin, Department of International Relations, University of Dhaka. Followed by our distinguished discussants, who will each speak for 7 to 10 minutes. The closing remarks will be delivered by Mr. Inayatullah Khan. Thank you very much and look forward to the discussions today. Now, I would like to hand over the opening remarks to Mr. Inayatullah Khan to commence this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Nabila. A very good afternoon. It's my privilege and pleasure to welcome today the three distinguished ambassadors from Nordic countries, Denmark, Sweden, and Norway. The Cosmos Foundation has emerged as an important forum for deliberating on Bangladesh's relations with friendly states. Therefore, our webinar today on Bangladesh-Nordic relations, Prognosis for Partnership, is of special significance to us. The 5 Nordic countries, Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway, and Sweden, all recognized Bangladesh on the same day, February 4th, 1972. This early and decisive move to come out and endorse the nascent state spoke to the support for Bangladesh's independence across the region in Northern Europe that these countries occupy. In historic times, the seafaring and adventure-loving Vikings may have never come to the Bay of Bengal. However, in modern times, their progeny, the Scandinavians, lost no time in connecting with Bangladesh. 3 of those countries soon established bilateral ties and set up their own missions here, Denmark, Sweden, and Norway. All 3 have since maintained a consistency and depth to their engagement with Bangladesh that have made them among our most important and trusted development partners. Over the 5 decades since this relationship has grown from strength to strength, there's much to celebrate as we observe 50 years of our collaboration. Through that period, Bangladesh has also progressed at a pace that is no less than remarkable. Today, we can take reasonable pride in our GDP of US $465 billion. Our growth rate, which is computed at 7.25% at present, is also no mean achievement. But in reaching where we have, we gratefully acknowledge the support of foreign friends like the governments of people of Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. In recent years, the countries have received a lot of attention for pioneering the so-called Nordic model, the social and economic system with certain features set to prevail there. A number of comparative studies of economic and social performance have ranked the Nordics high. Similarly, a number of cross-country comparisons have concluded that the Nordics indeed succeed better than other countries in combining economic efficiency and growth with a peaceful labor market, a fair distribution of income and social cohesion, and the model is often pointed to as a source of inspiration for other people in the search for a better social and economic system. A commitment to international development is also an integral part of the Nordic model itself. It is their approach to development as something more holistic than merely aid in the form of grants or ODAs that has set them apart. The commitment to Development Index is an annual ranking of the wealthiest nations in the world by how well their policies help people in developing countries. The latest edition of the index, done by the Center for Global Development, sees two of the three Nordic countries occupy the top three spots. In the past, there have been years when they have occupied all three of the top spots. In a statement accompanying the index, the GCD states that good development policy is about much more than foreign aid. That's why the index assesses the quality of a country aid in ranking them. That means the aid program's efficiency, transparency, and how well it fosters institutions and reduces the burden on the aid recipient or developing nations is also taken into account. This is where the projects supported by SIDA, DANIDA, and NORAD are set to have the edge. Those are all aspects of the Nordic approach to international development that anyone in Bangladesh familiar with their work over the years can recognize. And that Nordic commitment and contribution to international development is by no means limited only to Bangladesh. It made perfect sense, therefore, to organize this particular dialogue by gathering all three of the countries' ambassadors on the same platform to deliberate on their country's future relations with Bangladesh. We have noted with interest the content of the discussions on the occasion of the 50th anniversary of Bangladesh-Nordic relations. The three ambassadors called on the Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. The assurances of the continuity of close cooperation that emerged from that event were most welcome tidings to our people. For all these reasons that I have described, it gives me immense pleasure to most warmly welcome to three distinguished envoys of the Nordic states to our event today. Their Excellencies Ambassadors Winnie Astra Peterson of Denmark, Espen Richter Svensson of Norway, and Alex Bergholm Linde of Sweden. We are also delighted that we have today two of the most noted Bangladeshi academics as discussants, Professor Imtiaz Ahmed and Professor Lailafur Yasmin. It's my hope that our discussions today will cover a wide gamut of Bangladesh-Nordic relations. I remember last time we had this Bangladesh-Nordic dialogue was February 2020, 28 February to be precise, just before the pandemic, and which was an enormous success. And I think the Danish ambassador will remember that very nice in-person event that we held in 2020 Feb. And we hope that this dialogue will be equally successful. We are very happy that today Ambassador Iftikhar Chaudhry, former Foreign Affairs Advisor, scholar diplomat, and the president of our Cosmos Foundation will be chairing this event. Over to Dr. Chaudhry.
Thank you, Inayat, for those remarks and for basically marking out the parameters of our discussion today as well. I too am delighted to welcome to this webinar the three distinguished ambassadors and also our two sterling diplomats of incredible, who are incredibly qualified. Of course, the brief bios of all the speakers have been provided, which enables me to cut back on the intros. But suffice for me to say that they have all enjoy an exceedingly high level of recognition for their prodigious qualifications. The enormous enthusiasm with which the Nordic Week was celebrated recently reflects the warmth of the relationship between the Scandinavian countries and Bangladesh, and these which span across a spectrum of activities, social, political, and economic. But the noteworthy feature of each of these have been the emphasis on the human aspects. The direction has always been towards the upliftment of the quality of life and the betterment of living conditions. Those of us who are students of international relations will have observed that in contemporary times of intense realism and self-interest in global politics, the examples of this kind of interactions between two states in the international scene is rare. Now, Bangladeshis deeply value the Nordic countries. This is not only because of the nature of bilateral relations with them, as Anayat has described, though also that, but also because of the perceived role of these countries on the international matrix. The Nordic countries are always seen as a major factor for stability in a sea of global uncertainties. They have acquired a reputation as a force for good with strong moral overtones marked by characteristic human empathy. In my long career in diplomacy in the United Nations in Geneva and New York, and also in the academia here in Singapore, I have noted the goodwill that nations tend to entertain towards the Nordic countries, whether the issues are focused on climate, gender, human rights, disarmament, peacekeeping, or development cooperation. Bangladesh and Scandinavia have shared a deep relationship over 50 years, beginning as, Anayat has said, 4th of February, I think he mentioned as the date of the recognition of by these Scandinavian countries of independent Bangladesh. Now, from the very start, it was my privilege individually, personally, to lead the Scandinavian desk in the Planning Commission. Those days, what we call the ERD. ERD was a part of the Planning Commission. And to work with SIDA, NORAD, DANIDA, and also FINIDA, though Finland was not physically represented in Dhaka. Now, I fondly recall personal relations with such people as Börje Ljunggren of Sweden and Lasse Sam of Norway, both of whom rose to prominence in their respective offices and also on the international scene. Now, today, the aspiration for cooperation, which was then a twinkle in our eyes, have found fullest fruition in the manifold cooperation that our speakers and also the ambassadors will now speak to. Now, needless to say that I'm delighted to be able to chair this and conduct this very significant event. As we have discussed, we will begin by giving the floor first to the ambassador of Sweden, and thereafter the ambassadors will speak. And then we will have the discussants, as you have heard, speak for 7 to 10 minutes max. After which the floor will go back to the ambassadors, and I will have each of them make remarks that they would feel would complement what is being discussed. So now, to cut to the chase, I'll begin by inviting to the microphone Ambassador Alexandra von Linde of Sweden. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, distinguished President and Chairman of the Cosmos Group, distinguished members of the panel, all of you listening in, salam alaikum, and good afternoon to you all. It is our pleasure to attend this seminar to discuss the prognosis for the partnership between Bangladesh and the Nordic countries. We are happy to be back at Cosmos. As you mentioned, Chairman, the Nordic ambassadors did a similar discussion last time in the beginning of 2020. And it is safe to say that the world has really changed since then. And of course, let me start by saying that this event comes at the perfect timing. As has been mentioned several times, this year is a special year for the Nordic countries and Bangladesh, since we celebrate 50 years of bilateral relations. Indeed, our countries were among the first to recognize Bangladesh as a new, independent and sovereign state after following the struggle for freedom by the Bangladeshi people. So on the 4th of February 1972, we marked the start of our long and strong partnership. And since then, the Nordics are proud to have stood side by side with our Bangladeshi friends and partners. We see this as a relationship not only between our countries, but also our people. But if you allow me to start in another end, the concept of the Nordics. The cooperation between the Nordic countries, Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway, and Sweden, is extensive. It goes back a long time and is firmly rooted in our shared values and visions. Throughout our history, the Nordic countries have become increasingly integrated and have developed common values, principles, and policies that our societies rest firmly on. We think of ourselves as different, but the value platform is the same. This platform is based on values such as trust, transparency, accountability, and gender equality. The welfare state, with strong protection to its citizens, is at the very core of what we call the Nordic model. Institutionally, we have set up the Nordic Council, an interparliamentary body of cooperation, and the Nordic Council of Ministers to drive our continued integration. We are already one of the most integrated regions in the world, and we strive to become the world's most integrated region by 2030. The vision was adopted by the Nordic Prime Ministers, and in order to realize this, the Nordic Council of Ministers have named the areas of green, competitive, and socially sustainable Nordic region as key areas going forward. Given this very integrated approach, it is only natural that the 3 Nordic ambassadors in Dhaka are delivering a joint speech during this webinar. The integrated approach is something that has been evident, as has been mentioned already, in the celebration of our 50th anniversary with Bangladesh. For us, this is a year-long celebration that started already in February. On the 23rd of March, which internationally is recognized as the Nordic Day, we got the opportunity to jointly meet the Honorable Prime Minister and the Honorable Speaker of Parliament to discuss our partnership, past, present, and future. During the spring, we celebrated the broad, deep, and rich relations between our countries through what we called a Nordic Week. Within the framework of this week, we hosted a big business promotion event under the theme of sustainability with over 200 representatives from Nordic companies and other stakeholders. We did public media outreach as well as held a reception, just to mention a few examples. So this year is an important milestone, no doubt, and it has given us the opportunity to reflect on the partnership between the Nordics and Bangladesh. Over the past 5 decades, relations have continuously evolved, and we are proud that the Nordic countries have not only witnessed the impressive development journey and economic growth of Bangladesh, but also, to the best of our abilities, contributed to it. Early on, humanitarian aid was at the core, that later moved into a broad development cooperation, which has had multifaceted impacts in so many areas. Since then, our relationship have taken us far, and we are glad to see our ties transforming with an increasing focus on expanding our commercial ties. Nordic business have been in Bangladesh for decades and have made substantial investments in the country. Some, like Grameenphone, H&M, and Arla, have gone beyond business purposes and helped empower millions of people. In addition, we also see a clear interest from new companies keen on exploring the potential opportunities of the Bangladesh market. Let me continue by diving a bit more deep on the trade relation aspects between our countries. Needless to say, Bangladesh is continuing to make the case as an attractive business destination for the future. As one of the fastest growing economies in the Asia-Pacific region, Bangladesh's remarkable economic and social progress is nothing short of very impressive. Advancements in economic growth, infrastructure, as well as prominent social indicators such as life expectancy, education, and women's participation in the labor force have improved significantly, just to mention a few examples. The Nordic-Bangladesh trade relations have grown steadily over the years. Today, More than 100 Nordic companies are doing business in Bangladesh. And we think that all of these companies would agree with us when we say that there is scope for an enhanced trade and business relationship between the Nordics and Bangladesh going forward. Not least when it comes to areas such as sustainability, smart cities, urbanization, and digitalization. In light of Bangladesh graduation from LDC status, the Nordic countries and Bangladesh are becoming well positioned to expand their close cooperation. With that said, we also look forward to further dialogue and collaboration with relevant authorities to improve the overall business climate and the ease of doing business in Bangladesh, which still remain a barrier for increasing investment opportunities. The increase in business-related exchange opens up more opportunities for capacity building and sharing best practices between our countries. It will also result in an even greater focus on the green agenda and combining economic growth with sustainability. At the heart of this lies the Nordic joint focus on the green transition. And let me elaborate a bit more on what we mean with that, since this is an example of an area that we see as a major component of our future partnership with Bangladesh. Sustainability has been a clear overarching priority for the Nordic countries for a long time. Naturally, we have useful experience to share, and the Nordics have expertise on how to cultivate economic growth while simultaneously pursuing the reduction of CO2 emissions and energy consumption, as well as the sustainable use of natural resources. Many Bangladeshi companies have more recently initiated this road, and the Nordics aim to share the lessons learned of this journey with Bangladesh.
The Nordics have ambitious climate goals. For example, Denmark has undertaken to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions by at least 70% by 2030, and Norway a reduction of 40%. Sweden's goal is to reduce its emissions to net zero within 25 years, by 2045 at the latest, becoming the first fossil fuel welfare nation to do so. More than 3/4 of Nordic electricity is renewably sourced, and we were 2 years ahead of schedule in meeting our 2020 EU targets for renewable energy. Now, decarbonizing heavy vehicles, aviation, and shipping is a key priority. Our government's ambitions are being fully supported by our private sector and civil society. For instance, Danish Maersk Shipping commissioned the first vessels to run on green fuel. The Norwegian companies Yara and Kongsberg teamed up to build the world's first autonomous and zero-emission container vessel. This vessel, named Yara Birkeland, was put into commercial operation in Norway in the spring of this year. We believe that together, the Nordic countries can lead when it comes to sustainable transportation. The so-called World Energy Council's Energy Trilemma Index, based on energy security, energy equity, and environmental sustainability, recognizes the Nordic countries as having the highest ability to provide sustainable energy. We are proud to be at the forefront of sustainable technological development, recognizing that the future is fossil-free. Investing in innovation and circular business models will create the jobs of the future, as well as strengthen competitiveness. An example of this is, for instance, that Sweden recently delivered the world's first shipment of steel produced without the use of fossil fuels, what is hopefully a major milestone on the road towards cutting carbon emissions from industry. We know that the private sector plays a crucial part in both setting the agenda and offering many interesting solutions that could support in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement. We also know that many Nordic companies have adopted clear plans and goals on reducing their climate impact, which makes it necessary to reform their global supply chains. The possibilities to promote sustainable practices and to reuse, reduce, and recycle are large. The ability to adopt a green business model among suppliers will ultimately be business critical and a major factor for purchasing decisions going forward, and thus a fundamental condition for future access to global markets. There is also an increasing will of the consumers in Nordic countries to make sure that the products they are buying are sustainable and green, not only when it comes to emissions and clean energy, but also the overall environmental impact and carbon footprints. Nordic companies are not only viewed as frontrunners when it comes to sustainability, but also world leaders on innovation. Our companies are recognized for their state-of-the-art business standards, high-quality products, and exceptional service efficiencies. Many Nordic companies are well placed to provide well-tested cutting-edge green and climate-smart technologies, advanced skills, solutions, and services that Bangladesh will need to continue on its path of sustainable development and economic growth. The Nordic countries look forward to partnering up with Bangladesh on this journey. Let us then mention some bilateral examples of the Nordic countries scaling up partnership with Bangladesh within this area. Both Sweden and Denmark have been pushing the green transition within the RMG sector, both within our trade policy and development cooperation for a long time. The RMG sector in Bangladesh is of high strategic and economic importance for both our countries and Bangladesh in terms of trade, growth, exports, and employment opportunities. Many Nordic brands have ambitious climate goals, and at the same time, there are many Nordic companies that can offer innovative and climate-smart solutions and technology to meet these needs.
Sweden aims at combining and coordinating these efforts under one umbrella and has therefore launched an initiative that we call the Sustainable Fashion Platform. The platform aims to facilitate both matchmaking between companies to find synergies within the green transition and also conduct policy dialogue with relevant stakeholders to discuss best practices in the RMG sector going forward. With this, Sweden hopes to position itself as a partner to Bangladesh within sustainability and the green transition in the RMG industry, and at the same time continue to strengthen Bangladesh competitiveness in this sector. Sweden's effort on promoting the green transition within the trade policy goes in tandem with our different work streams within development cooperation. In line with the Swedish government's initiative on broader economic relations called STEP, Sustainable Transition through Economic Partnership, we aim at finding synergies and links between these two pillars of our foreign policy and make them mutually reinforcing. Our development cooperation covers a wide range of areas, and one of our thematic areas is climate, environment, and resilience. This includes providing the resources and capacities needed to reduce the impact of climate change on the most vulnerable people, as well as financing and implementing climate adaptation so that people can better assess risks and manage the effect of climate change.
Let me mention another example. The governments of Denmark and Bangladesh in April, and under the auspices of Her Royal Highness Crown Princess Mary of Denmark during her visit to Bangladesh, the two governments signed a green and sustainable partnership agreement here in Dhaka. A first of its kind, this has strengthened our focus on green and joint green and sustainable action of our governments for the years to come. So this green agreement will apply to all our relations, be it diplomatic, political, commercial, and development cooperation. And in addition, Denmark recently took the decision to go from aid to trade over the coming 6 years. This means phasing out development cooperation over the years to come, while we'll be expanding and scaling up the commercial relations. So transfer of knowledge and technology through private sector collaboration, through joint research, and through peer-to-peer collaboration between Danish and Bangladeshi public institutions, as we are already doing in the area of occupational health and safety, and hope to have shortly also in food safety.
Norway, like Bangladesh, is a maritime nation and has built up wide-ranging know-how on energy and marine resources. Together with the IMO, we have entered into an agreement paving the way for Bangladesh to move forward on its path towards becoming a party to the IMO Hong Kong Convention on the safe and environmental friendly recycling of ships. This work is showing remarkable progress, and through the IMO, we will continue to support the authorities, the industries, and other stakeholders in strengthening their efforts to develop Bangladesh's ship recycling industry, by the way, which is an industry where Bangladesh is world leader, and the country's economy. Ensuring that the oceans are healthy and productive for future generations is high on the agenda, both in Norway and in Bangladesh. In the coming years, the oceans will be even more crucial for global food security, poverty reduction, international transport, and efforts to address climate change and the environment. Norway hopes to work with Bangladesh on the Nordic initiative to establish a global agreement to combat marine plastic litter and microplastics. For example, a collaboration with the Bangladesh Department of Environment has been initiated to reduce environmental impacts, improve productivity, and foster innovation and entrepreneurship through an integrated approach to sustainable plastics use and marine litter prevention. Closing the tap on marine litter is a must-do. This is important for all of us. Climate change, multilateralism, and gender equality are also important. The green shift will indeed be necessary for our future. As one of the most climate vulnerable nations in the world, Bangladesh has been a global pioneer in managing the risks of natural disasters. The Nordics commend Bangladesh and its tireless efforts to tackle the challenges related to climate change and the environment. We're also proud to have been supporting these response measures, such as cyclone shelters and disaster prevention and management in Bangladesh for many decades. Rest assured that we will stay strong in our continued commitment to support Bangladesh in its work towards adapting to climate change.
So allow me to take over. The Nordic countries are generous supporters of climate funds, both the Green Climate Fund, the Adaptation Fund, other multilateral funds through the international financing institutions. And we cooperate with Bangladesh by helping to access these funds. So the Nordics are very pleased to see Bangladesh's updated NDC presented during COP26 and looking forward to participating and pushing the dialogue during the upcoming COP27. The updated NDC shows an increased level of ambition by Bangladesh in meeting the climate action commitments, including reducing the emissions in different sectors and increasing investments in renewable energy, among other measures. Now, pursuing ambitious climate action is a question of solidarity with future generations, with people throughout the world, and with our ecological system. Given this, an ambitious climate policy goes hand in hand with welfare, equality, and justice for all. The Nordic countries and Bangladesh are signatories to various climate agreements, but tackling climate changes cannot be done in isolation. It requires partnership, cooperation, and an inclusive approach. We therefore support climate policies that take all people into account and ensures that resources are directed to where they are needed most, and that we leave no one behind. Now, the Nordic countries are relatively small countries, but among the keenest supporters of multilateralism, of global solidarity, and of international law. We share this ambition with Bangladesh. Defending the rules-based world order is perhaps more important today than ever. Russia's unprovoked military action against Ukraine, which is a blatant violation of one of the most fundamental rules of international law, is a clear proof of that. The Nordic countries will continue their steadfast support of Ukraine in its efforts to defend its sovereignty and independence in so many ways. The Nordics also believe that multilateralism is key in order to jointly tackle the many challenges that we face. We know that Bangladesh shares this perspective, and we are glad to see Bangladesh's very active role in the United Nations, including its consistent contributions as one of the biggest troop contributing nations in the Peace-Building Commission, in the chairmanship of the Indian Ocean Rim Association and the Climate Vulnerable Forum. We see great potential for further international cooperation within many of these areas, and the UN is a natural arena for that. Turning to the global fight against COVID, it's also part of the Nordic commitment to multilateralism. We all reaffirm our strong commitment to effective and equal global access to COVID-19 vaccines. Global challenges require global solutions. We stand united in our commitment to the ongoing reforms of the international system for pandemic preparedness and response. We have to learn from the past. We cannot wait for the next outbreak to turn into a pandemic before we act again. The Nordic countries also strongly support Bangladesh in its efforts to ensure the basic needs and rights of the Rohingya refugees. In addition to providing humanitarian aid to the refugees since the beginning in 2017, we have extended our diplomatic support for Bangladesh in its effort to ensure a dignified, safe, and voluntary repatriation of the Rohingyas to Myanmar when the conditions allow for that. Another important pillar of our partnership going forward is gender equality. We believe that gender equality is a fundamental pillar of an inclusive, sustainable, and just society, because we cannot build societies for the future if half of the population continues to be excluded. So in order to achieve sustainable development, gender-sensitive policies and approaches are crucial to facilitate inclusive social development. Women simply need to be involved in the planning and development of policy to ensure that their specific needs are met. Gender equality and women's empowerment is thus an area where the Nordic countries and Bangladesh share a strong commitment, and where we have worked together for decades. This includes, and is not limited to, promoting women's and girls' opportunities, both in terms of economic empowerment and access to livelihoods and education. And our joint efforts have resulted in positive advancements, but more, of course, obviously, still needs to be done. We look forward to continuing our cooperation on strengthening women's and girls' rights and addressing social norms power structures, and the root causes of gender inequality, gender-based violence, and discrimination. We welcome the progress and the government of Bangladesh's support of empowering women. It is shown, for example, within the R&D sector in Bangladesh, a sector we know depends on and is driven by the labor of millions of Bangladeshi women who have joined the workforce over the decades. They have contributed greatly to the economic development of Bangladesh. We are also taking note of the active role of the Honorable Prime Minister in encouraging the international community to come together and act as a force for gender equality, which has been expressed in so many fora internationally. It is important to ensure that women's empowerment is on top of everybody's mind, but it is not only a women's issue. We need also to engage boys and men to achieve gender equality. By using and sharing their power and privileges, boys and young men have the ability to shift the dominant norms and ideas about gender and masculinity and challenge the patriarchal beliefs, practices, institutions, and structures that drive inequality between men and women. Because we know that when women's economic empowerment increases, society as a whole benefits. Distributing resources equally and investing in women's empowerment is therefore not only the right thing to do, it's also the smart thing to do. Respect for democracy and human rights are also key elements of the Nordic countries of our common DNA. Our welfare states are built on an inclusive, transparent, and equal society with respect for the rule of law, and that can provide the opportunity for all to participate in the development of society. We are by no means perfect in this regard, far from it actually, but this is the ambition, because we firmly believe that respect for human rights, including freedom of expression, freedom of the press, labor rights, as well as a vibrant civil society, creates stability, security, growth, and economic prosperity. And these are actually the backbone of our welfare state. The Nordic countries are following the upcoming elections next year here in Bangladesh and have reiterated the importance of free and fair elections and the ability for the Bangladeshi people to express their views in accordance with the constitution. Supporting civil society organizations that engage in civic voter education, election observation, and the promotion of women candidates would also be actions favoring competitive elections. Now, before I end, as you can hear, we have made a remarkable journey together during these 50 years. Our partnership has been through challenges and successes, and we have stood firmly by Bangladesh's side. It's fair to say that the Nordics want to continue to be trusted partners and friends of Bangladesh. We look forward to a sustainable partnership and friendship for the coming 50 years and beyond. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Does that conclude the Nordic presentation? Thank you so much, ambassadors. The calibrated manner in which you have sort of very coherently made this presentation in itself is a model to emulate, the Nordic model to emulate in a webinar. So this is how webinars ought to be organized. So it was extremely seamless the way in which you moved from the three ambassadors speaking as one, as if it were, and yet covering a whole spectrum of subjects that included the need to focus on issues like sustainability, on digitalization, on urbanization, on smart cities, moving to the trade side, where I think a remarkable feature of the Scandinavian participation is the fact that in the 100 companies or so that you mentioned, you see, all of these entail technology transfer, which is extremely, extremely important to take us to transition to a tech economy, to make the green transition, as you say, to the tech economy. You covered social aspects, human rights, the gender balance, and how to cooperate, for all of us to cooperate together in order to build a vibrant, pluralist polity at home as well. So thank you so much. I will now recognize our distinguished discussants, starting with Professor Imtiaz Ahmed, a very well-known personality in the academia, in the country and abroad, whom I had the privilege of having been not together at the same time, but a decade apart in the same alma mater, the Australian National University. So Imtiaz, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Chaudhry, or Iftikhar Bhai, as I say. And thank you, the ambassadors, absolutely superb. I think Iftikhar Bhai has pointed out, it's almost like a harmony. And I was almost thinking that I'm listening to one person and not three persons. That was the beauty of the presentation. Superb on Bangladesh and Nordic countries. I fondly remember all the three countries. I visited all the three countries. I've been a very good friend of Ambassador Ragni Birtelun, and I visited her hometown in Vikesson. I've seen the fjord. I visited Uppsala University, going there to speak there. I've also visited Denmark, and I am family related. One of my first cousins is married to a Denmark envoy. So we have a Jamai. I say we have a Danish Jamai in our family. All the three speakers have been very strong on the issue of environment, and I understand, that's been the core of the Nordic image that we have. And here I think, since we are familiar with some of the interesting carbon neutral islands also, one can talk about the Bornholm, island, where you have a carbon neutral place altogether. I was just thinking whether it is possible to replicate something of that kind in one or two villages, just to give a model of how one can, go for a carbon neutral place. So a village too would actually help if Nordic countries could think of investing on that, and that could be a model. The second issue on the issue of on the Rohingya, we talk about multilateralism, we talk about bilateral initiative, and of course we also talk about tripartite initiative, and we have one, people who talk about China taking initiative. And I was just thinking, Nordic countries are placed, particularly your recognition of peace and your agenda on peace is so solid. Whether Nordic countries can take a tripartite initiative when it comes to Myanmar, Bangladesh, and the Nordic countries, because that itself will go a long way in creating a stability here. And also the concept of, Ambassador Linde talked about concept of Nordic. And, when we talk of Nordic, we always have peace as a central element to that. So I was just thinking whether the Nordic negotiators could energize themselves. I know Myanmar could be a tough call, but there's no reason why Nordic countries would not get into a tripartite kind of an engagement and try to resolve this issue. Now that brings me to one or two, things that I want to raise. Maybe the ambassadors could respond at the end. The Nordic image that we have somehow during the Ukrainian-Russian conflict, it looks to be, getting a little bit messy, with more attention on NATO, more attention on, supporting US policy uncritically. That is a disturbing factor for us, for many of us, at least for myself as an academician, because we always thought Nordic to be very different. Now, when Sweden here, is thinking of joining NATO and not returning to diplomacy or not helping diplomacy, even on the Ukrainian-Russia war, you can see it's Turkey which has made some difference to the war with the grain initiative, and now with the transfer of prisoners. Well, Saudi Arabia was also there. So I was just thinking, what happened to the Nordic countries? Because you have a solid kind of foundation when it comes to negotiation. So there, my question would be whether that is something that you are thinking, or will you be just uncritically supporting United States agenda in Europe? Because that looks to be quite, the future doesn't look to be quite exciting, given some of the changes in Sweden, and also yesterday in Italy. One can easily see that people have different understanding of what NATO should do and where it should go. So I was just thinking, how would you respond to that? My final point would be, it looks like, the world is moving towards a multipolar world, and there is no way to stop that. We had, and at one stage, we had a unipolar world back during the Pax Britannica, and then it went to bipolar with United States and Soviet Union, and then with the dismantling of the Soviet Union, we had another unipolar. But this is for the first time in the recorded history of the world and of human beings that we are entering into a multipolar world, and Europe could be definitely one of the polar. So I was just thinking, how are you seeing yourself as three countries? Although the population, I was looking into the population data, I see that your population is less than the population of Dhaka. Collectively, Dhaka's population is 22.4 million, and all three Nordic countries would be 21.5 million. So I can understand the scale for us, with 170 million people as the seventh largest country. Probably our agenda would be different. But I was just thinking that in the multipolar world that is coming up, how do you frame yourself, your policies, and the relationship that you will have with other countries in the world? I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Imtiaz. Good remarks. I should think very good. In fact, I mean, the idea of a model village, carbon neutral village, taking advantage of this, the Scandinavian paradigm for carbon neutrality, that is a very good idea. The possibility of an intervention, a diplomatic intervention in order to ease the Rohingya problem and the problems with Myanmar. Yes, I don't know what the reaction of the governments would be, but even in this region, Norway, for instance, we know that has been active in Sri Lanka at one point in time, as we are all aware. So that's one suggestion you make, and the third is a very sort of global international political point. I mean, the changes that are coming over in the behavior pattern of the Northern European countries. Time was when there used to be some of you may recall, called Erling Björl, who had written on Finland's relationship with the then Soviet Union, and he had said they follow a pilot fish behavior, which is you tack close to the shark in order to avoid being eaten. You see. So is that coming apart, or are they definitely taking sides? One question, though, I mean, judging from what Imtiaz has been saying, the Nordic Council. Now, it used to be Council of the Parliaments and then the ministers. Is there? Does the Council exist at the highest political level of heads of government or heads of state? And how do you actually coordinate decisions on a single political issue? Some of you are European members and some are not. So that would be my question. But you might want to react to that later. For now, Lelifar, Yasmin, you have, I think, your traffic issues well noted, or lack of them in Scandinavia. You can go on to substantive issues now.
Okay, so thank you once again for giving me the floor. Sar has covered most of the areas which I was actually looking forward to, so that I don't have to speak much. But thank you for an excellent coordinated presentation on identifying how Nordic countries are engaged with Bangladesh and what are the areas that you are, helping, assisting Bangladesh in his path to being a developed country. So I would start with one of the issues that was pointed out by one of the Danish ministers who visited recently in Bangladesh, His Excellency Flemming Møller Mortensen, who came here after 39 years. He was in Bangladesh 39 years back, and after 39 years coming to Bangladesh, he said that what a tremendous development Bangladesh has achieved. That Bangladesh of 39 years ago and Bangladesh of today is an entirely different entity. So the recognition of these and this means a lot for Bangladesh, because we all know that how Bangladesh started off in 1971 as a sovereign independent country with virtually nothing. Businessmen who needed to import something from outside of Bangladesh, they did not have enough foreign currency to initiate the business, and from there on where Bangladesh has come today. So one aspect I would like to point out is the institutionalization of relationship among the Nordic countries in one hand and Bangladesh on the other hand. A number of framework of cooperation that has been mentioned by three of the ambassadors here, and I would say that not only that, but there are certain issue areas that Norway, Sweden, and Denmark are working on in the areas of blue ocean economy, in the areas of diversification within the RMG, in the area of assisting governments, industries to meet the challenges that are coming from other countries. For example, meeting the carbon emission goals. It has been pointed out. Also in the areas to fulfill Bangladesh's commitment to 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, especially identified peace building area, peacekeeping area, fighting against terrorism and violent extremism, where Norway, Sweden, and Denmark collectively are assisting Bangladesh. Also, how Norway has pointed out that it remains committed to the Anand Commission recommendation when it comes to the Rohingya issue. In the areas of climate change adaptation and mitigation, environmental damage and loss of biodiversity, Denmark has particular connection with Bangladesh at the government level, and also how in the areas of creating sort of in the areas of creating soft power involvement in the case of Bangladesh. For example, I know that Concerts Norway is an organization which is working with Bangladeshi musicians and Bangladeshi cultural area for regenerating the lost art of Bangladesh, lost music of Bangladesh. There has been some smaller areas which may seem like a very small investment. For example, there has been a paint factory which is working with several $1 million only. Bangladesh chapter of the Norwegian company has now established working here. So the point of easing of business in Bangladesh, this is something that is being explored and that is being worked here, as well as we can see that some of the areas that I would point out, for example, with Sweden, the trade statistics, it does not reflect what is actually happening because the actual trade is much more higher, but it is shown as in lower because of it is dependent on in which port the trade items for Sweden is being offloaded. So there are certain areas that often are not reflected properly in Bangladesh-Sweden relations, that the Sweden's import from Bangladesh is quite higher than is reflected in official trade statistics. So I would sort of point out a couple of areas. For example, Sarah has pointed out about carbon efficient sort of model villages. So I would point it out to look into that. Bay of Bengal hosts the third largest dead zone, where denitrification is taking place in a quite a high rate, and it is just if you go down south, it is near to India and down south from Bangladesh. So this is the third largest area where ocean is this is called oxygen Oxygen Minimum Zone, OMZ, and this is something that we need technical assistance from countries to understand this, and so that it does not turn into a sort of a threat for Bangladesh in the Bay of Bengal region in the next in coming years. Number one. Number two, deep sea fishing, something that the entire South Asia region lacks, where there is oceans are losing fish resources, especially in North Sea, around the coast of Japan and some other areas. But in South Asia, Bangladesh, India, Sri Lanka, and other countries, we do not have capacity in going for deep sea fishing. So this is another area that Nordic countries who have tremendous expertise, they can assist in they can assist Bangladeshis. Number three, shipbuilding industries. Here, Bangladesh and Norway are already working, but you have seen recently Bangladesh has exported its first ocean-going vessel to United Kingdom. So this is one other area that the Nordic countries can work with Bangladesh. Number four, I see that the kind of scholarly endeavor that goes on in Sweden, as Sar has mentioned about Uppsala, the way the idea of violence, the idea of peacekeeping, the idea of peacemaking, these have originated from Sweden, and their implication of these and exchange of academic from Bangladesh to Nordic countries and to learn each other. And one other area I would like, in connection to this, I would like to point out that Sar and I, along with some other academics, were invited by one of the embassies here, and they sort of wanted us to represent Bangladesh to some other countries. And in my experience, I forgot to mention in the beginning, not only Denmark, but I also visited Sweden. And there is a famous city where summer festival, a music festival takes place. I forgot the name of the small town, but it was very interesting. And when I went there, people were looking at me like, who is this person? Where is Bangladesh? And there is very little understanding about Bangladesh in Nordic countries. So I would like you to sort of think about this, that it is not only government to government initiative, but how we can sort of create certain kind of visibility of Bangladesh. Because with my interaction with a number of scholars, number of countries, policymakers, I have seen that what Bangladesh lacks is a proper representation of its image in different countries. So this is something I would like to point out, that to promote Bangladesh's visibility, what you can do from here. And then another point of view would be, European Union recently has signed a treaty with Vietnam in exporting of in the case of technology transfer, so that Vietnam can meet the challenges of fourth industrial era, as well as develop its expertise in artificial intelligence. So this is something I would request you to look into, so that Bangladesh can have this kind of technology transfer related agreements with European Union, as well as with Nordic countries, because this is the next challenge, as ambassadors have mentioned, that RMG is a strategic industry of Bangladesh. This is something that 90% of our trade that takes place between EU countries, EU DSC countries, DSC countries of OECD. So that is the area we need to develop our expertise, and we need technical assistance, we need technological assistance, and we need this kind of particular agreements to sign. So I would request to look into whether there are ample sort of areas where Nordic countries can assist Bangladesh in developing itself to cope with the upcoming challenges of fourth IR and artificial intelligence. Last but not the least, I would like to sort of point out what Imtiaz sir has pointed out before me, that neutrality in foreign policy is something that has taken Bangladesh this far. That is, often it is criticized that Bangladesh is not being assertive enough, that Bangladesh needs to take sides. But I would argue alongside Imtiaz sir that it is Bangladesh's development has taken place because it has followed a certain path, growth without enmity, that Bangladesh has good relations relations with all the countries of the world, it might seem that in international relations, how can this be possible? But Bangladesh has shown that it was a test case of development. In 1976, the book was published by two eminent scholars of World Bank, who argued that if Bangladesh can develop, any countries of the world can develop. Unfortunately, all the other countries of the developing countries or least developed countries, they were not able to develop in the scale that Bangladesh has been able to develop. And therefore, we argue from Bangladesh that it has been possible because of growth without enmity, because Bangladesh has taken a certain foreign policy posture when its national interest its national interest was important. So Bangladesh has been able to do that, and as some countries of Europe are now planning to join NATO, that tells us that whether how the future looks like. Are we going back in the past, or are we actually because the upcoming challenges coming from climate change, where, as rightfully pointed out, none of us are immune to this, whether we live in Sweden or in Bangladesh. So therefore, and remember that the first environmentally displaced refugee was acknowledged in France. That was a Bangladeshi citizen. It happened in December 2020 because of level of air pollution. One Bangladeshi citizen who was suffering from different diseases, he did not want to return to Bangladesh, and France's court granted him asylum, being the first environmentally displaced refugees. And more of these cases will emerge if we collectively do not look into this issue. Instead, if we sort of transfer our resources from these particular areas to the areas of defense and other areas, I do not know what will happen collectively to humanity. And especially coming back from Japan just a couple of days back. In fact, as you can see, a Japanese lady is over there in my stand. So what I've seen, that how new generation, they are continuously looking at a future where they are more inclined to use public transport instead of purchasing a car. They are talking about their individual roles in fighting carbon emission, and they are increasingly talking about how to live and let live. This has been a fascinating experience for me, something that is happening already in Japan, and we are yet to catch up with that. We are yet to learn about that. So I'll finish my talk here. I'm sorry if I've taken much time than I was allotted. Thank you very much for inviting me in this program.
Thank you, Lalipur. You made a series of remarks across a very broad spectrum. You've made good contribution, I think, on many subjects, very varied, of course. But your idea of beginning with small things, I think, is very well taken. I recall once Mrs. Brundtland, she'd come to Bangladesh, and she said, remarked something similar to that. She was then, I think, the DG of WHO at that point in time. Interestingly, like one little historical footnote to the RMG industry, when we were going into RMG in a serious manner, there was actually competition from Northern Europe and also the South, also Spain and Italy. And there needed to be what was called structural adjustment. I mean, the Scandinavian countries needed to go back in it and give us space to develop. Today, interestingly, the Nordic countries still remain a bellwether for sustainability, the new kind of manufacture where, a new paradigm of manufacture where you make a contribution to promote nature rather than reduce it. You see, so this is one technology that, as you say, through institutionalization of relationships, it may be transferred from Scandinavia to Bangladesh. Thank you. All right. So what we're going to do now is going to give back to the three-in-one, three ambassadors in one, and allow you to organize yourselves in the way in which you want to react to some of the points made. Some have been on domestic issues, some have been on international issues. Inayat, you wanted to say something? Yeah.
Yeah, I just like to ask a question. I mean, I'll be doing the closing remarks, but very recently in Financial Times, I just read an article. Norway accused of selfish energy plans. But but definitely energy is going to cause a lot of unhappiness and suffering in Europe, as we can see that the European countries were depending on the Russian gas. But my question to the Norwegian ambassador is that how Europe's energy crisis caused by this Ukraine war is impacting Nordic countries. Especially I think Norway is thinking of, like not exporting electricity to the your neighboring countries. There are some dissatisfactions according to the Financial Times, if I misquote. But I would like to hear your answer to it.
Okay, I suspect there will be more questions even after the sort of the final remarks that the ambassadors make. So we are looking to some kind of a conversation henceforth. But I give the floor back to the ambassadors and let them react either together or individually to some of the points that were raised here. And then we will open up for questions even more. Thank you.
This part is not really coordinated, only in the way that we agreed to play as we go. So
That's why I said calibrated rather than coordinated. You see. Okay, never mind.
Let me start with a couple of the questions, and then my colleagues can chip in and cover some of the others. I would like to take Professor Imtiaz Ahmed's questions on the Nordic image when it comes to Ukraine, and also where we as Nordics see ourselves in a new multipolar world. I think as Nordics, we are very firmly rooted in Europe. Sweden, Denmark, Finland also are members of the EU. Norway, Iceland are not, but with very close ties to the EU, both politically, but also the market. So in that way, we are very like-minded, strong transatlantic relations to the US. We have been Norway, Denmark, long members of NATO. Now Sweden and Finland are also seeking to join us on this. And this is because, in my view, we have a new reality in Europe. We have not had war in Europe for the past, I can't count how many years since the Second World War. And we have all been very surprised to see war in European territory once again, and frightened. We are also close neighbors to Russia. We are very close friends. The Baltic nations are even closer. So we feel this very strongly, and the urge to defend ourselves if such atrocities can happen on the borders of Europe. So I think, as you have also seen in the press internationally, Europe has moved closer together, inside or outside NATO, inside or outside the EU. So that has really made us react with shock. Now, our international action, you can say, is firmly rooted on our values, as we also mentioned in our introductory speech. And these values are actually not solely Nordic. They are very much UN values. And UN values are, as you know, values that we share with all the signatory nations to the UN Charter, to the human rights, etc. So in that, we call them Nordic values, but indeed they go far beyond. And that is also what is, and we take them very seriously. So that is also very much what is at the bottom of our relations to the rest of the world. I think that I'll end here and invite my colleagues to chip in on this and then I can come back at another time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Sweden, perhaps.
Yes, I agree with all that Vinny has said on this issue. I think I might want to comment on that, given that Sweden is one of the two countries among the Nordics that have now applied for NATO membership. So just to add a bit on that, I think that your question, Professor, of course, suggests a certain manner in which how you perceive the world from Bangladesh. And as you understand, how we perceive the world from ours is totally different. So I think that for us, there is a clear aggressor here, and there is a clear victim. And this narrative that I see from here often, that this is a wider conflict, that is something that we don't see it the same way. There is one aggressor that has blatantly disregarded international law. It's a nuclear power state. It's a member of the permanent five in the Security Council that has taken the road from diplomacy and into aggression to invade a much smaller country in the heart of Europe. And this is something that, as neighbors, that you cannot just passively look on at. For us, and that's why you have seen Europe as a whole coming together in this very critical moment for us. For us, this has changed the European security order as we know it. We don't share a border with Russia, but Finland does. And we have known our big neighbor for a long time. So therefore, yes, on the 16th of May, the Swedish government took a rather historical decision of applying for the NATO membership. And I say historical because we have been non-military aligned for 200 years, which gives you a bit of the kind of perspective that I'm talking about, and how seriously we view this situation. This decision has broad national support. It is firmly anchored within the majority of the parties in the parliament. It has been taken independently, but in tandem with Finland. And it is firmly based in the belief that we build security to the best together with others. So we see this NATO membership as a complement to the membership that we have in EU, to the membership that we have in the UN, to our partnerships with the other Nordic, Baltic countries. And as both Denmark and Norway has shown over the years, NATO membership is an addition. It doesn't exclude the fact that we still have are based in the value platform that we have been talking about. So I think that is how it should be perceived, and I do understand that the world from the Bangladeshi perspective looks different, and therefore from the Nordic perspective it is slightly different too, given that we have the conflict right at the very heart of Europe. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Of course, I mean, this is an academic, basically an academic seminar. So there are times when you speak as ambassador, and there are times when you might have to speak as students of international relations. So a question, I mean, we have noticed a broad cross-party agreement on the way Sweden relates to the rest of the world. On this subject, of course, relations with Russia, there won't be any difference between the previous governments and the forthcoming one. do people need to watch out for any subtle changes in foreign policy with the new government? I mean, this is for the first time we see a government of this kind in Sweden after since the war, perhaps. So, do you have any comments to make on this? You needn't. I mean, of course, we don't know how these will turn out. Just a question that you expect these to be rooted certainly in the values platform, as you say, but also specifically on other issues. Would the foreign policy not change at all?
Okay, so just to be answer straight back, and then we of course move on to the other issues that we have been touching upon. So yes, so we had an election, of course, as we all know, the 11th of September this year. It was a democratic process, a free, fair, transparent election. It was the result was very, very even between the two blocks that we nowadays have in Swedish politics. And as can be expected by a democratic process, although the outcome was even, the current prime minister, a couple of days later, when all the votes had been counted, asked to be relieved of her duties, and was therefore then dismissed by the Speaker of Parliament. But this government, first of all, just to understand where we are in this process, because I think it has consequences for my reply. This government for now is a caretaker government. We don't have a new government in place yet. Today, the Parliament will open, and we will elect a new speaker, and the current speaker has given, after collaboration and dialogue with all the parties, have given the moderates the assignment to try to form a government. So I think for now we have a caretaker government and we don't have a new one. I think that only after we know, after we have voted on a new prime minister and the government that person will fold, and when we know what constellation of parties we have, we then know what course of Sweden will take in both domestic issues and foreign policy issues. I think it is the prerogative, of course, of every new government to shape that direction. And I think that without, of course, predicting anything about the future, because as a diplomat, we are now in this situation, so I will refrain to speculate or on the future. But if you look back, it hasn't, in terms of the foreign policy, it has been quite steady throughout the decades. Of course, you have this value platform that we talk about, and there is adjustments made. But I think it is the prerogative of the new government to shape both foreign policy, of course, and domestic policy. And therefore, I think that at this point we will have to wait and see. But that is that's what I can say about that at this point.
Thank you. Ambassador Richter Svensson, anything to add?
So far, this has been extremely interesting exchange of opinions and views, and a very long list of questions. But before getting to that, I need to grab this opportunity to say what a pleasure it is to again see you, Dr. Chaudhary, whose visit to Norway in November 2007 I had the honor to organize. I was at that time the desk officer for Bangladesh in the MFA Oslo. And I have in front of me here the minutes from your meeting with our then foreign minister, who is now our prime minister. Yeah. So, and I must say for the other people in this meeting that you presented some very wise observations and advice, and expressed some very meaningful and good hopes for Bangladesh in the role that you were in at that time. So that was part of my part of the reason why I have become so fascinated and interested in Bangladesh. So it's good to see you again, sir. Secondly, to comment on a couple of things. Well, just on the Ukraine thing, I mean, Norway has a border with Russia. Norway has an all-weather relationship with Russia. We have been working closely with Russia always in order to manage, for example, our joint or our common marine resources in the seas between our two countries. We have delimited our sea border in the north. We have introduced a good regime for fish, fisheries management, and we have expanded our cooperation into many, many fields. We now see that our big neighboring country has invaded one of its other neighboring countries, and of course that is the starting point for how we see it. NATO or no NATO, this is so it really has had a deep impact on the perceptions of Russia in Norway, and I can only sign on to what has been said by Alex and Winnie about the wider perspectives of this. Secondly, Nordic cooperation. Professor Dr. Chaudhary, you asked about this, the many levels of Nordic cooperation, and let me assure you that this cooperation takes place on absolutely every level, from football clubs in any part of the country up to the prime ministers. So it's really a close-knit cooperation. Our prime ministers, our foreign ministers, they meet regularly. Actually, I heard once a Norwegian minister who said that after having been working for a while, he said that, frankly, I don't understand why we have embassies in the Nordic countries. I mean, I'm in contact with my colleagues there every single day. So what do these embassies do? What added value do they provide? So, but we still have the embassies. So I think generally they seem to do a good job. There was some talk about Myanmar, and of course that is a big concern for all of us. And regarding the possibility for some kind of Nordic initiative for peace, I mean, Norway has been working in peace processes all over the world for many decades, and we have had several successes and some notable failures. But one thing which all of these processes have in common is that we are there at the request of all the parties. And unless you have that foundation, there is nothing we can do. And I think at the moment there is no prospect of having such a foundation. I can tell you that Norway has been working inside Myanmar for many, many years, and that was before the changes we saw some years back when Aung San Suu Kyi came to power. So we were in Myanmar at that time, and we still have good networks there. But situations on the ground and the political reality there now is not of a kind that lends itself to any kind of initiatives as the one suggested, unfortunately, because I think we all see the hopelessness of the situation. Where are the solutions? And for Bangladesh, of course, it is a tragedy with the huge number of Rohingya stranded in Bangladesh. And maybe I must also say, maybe even the danger that new arrivals will try to make it across the border. So we are working with Bangladesh, and we are strongly in supporting the response, the humanitarian response in Bangladesh, as we have been doing since 2017, along with our the other Nordic countries and many others, of course. Yeah. What else? There was some talk about energy policies in Europe. It's a real problem that one supplier suddenly is failing to deliver, and the market is currently undergoing a very brutal cure to set up different structures. Norway has much to contribute in this. We are oil and gas exporting nation, especially gas exporting to Europe. And we have already tweaked our production so that we have increased our production and deliveries to Europe by, I don't remember the percentage, but at least more than 10% only this year. Electricity, the situation is that Norway is a part of a European cooperation in electricity. This summer, we've had the additional problem that there has been little rain in Norway, so all our hydropower production has been reduced, and so we have seen energy prices in Norway skyrocket. And that is a big problem for many of the people, especially in southern Norway, where this has been a huge problem. And of course, we are discussing how to deal with that. But I believe we are still firmly committed to taking part in the European networks in this field. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, and regarding the investment climate in Bangladesh, we always hear from our Bangladeshi counterparts that they want to see more investment from our countries to Bangladesh, and I think all three of us always say that. So do we. We also want that. But at the same time, of course, we have to realize that investors are very rational people who make rational decisions. They're not afraid to take a risk, but it is not a wild risk. So I think the best way to attract more investment to Bangladesh is for the investors that are already here to show that they are doing very well here. Then I believe that more investors will come. But as Lalipur pointed out, a Norwegian paint producer has recently set up a factory just outside Dhaka. So, and we see new companies coming in regularly, although maybe not as many as we would have liked. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador, for those responses. And also, Ambassador, I want to thank you. 14 years late, perhaps, but thank you for organizing a splendid visit, which it was. And I had long been an admirer of Jonas Støre when he was special assistant to Gro Harlem Brundtland. And thereafter, when he was foreign minister those days and became prime minister, a very brave man. I recall an incident in Afghanistan, I think, when he came under attack and a cameraman was killed in the process. Anyway, and thank you for the responses and welcome to Dhaka. I'm absolutely certain that with your stewardship of Norwegian policies and as a part of the Nordic goal, we will develop our bilateral relations even further. I thought Karim Wahid, did you have a question? Are you there, Karim Wahid?
Yes, sir. How are you?
Yeah. You sent me a message, I think. You had a question?
I did, actually. I had a question for the Danish ambassador. Ambassador, I believe Denmark has become the first country to pledge funds to developing countries specifically for loss and damage. Could you please elaborate on that and how Bangladesh can benefit from that?
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you for the question that has hit the press over the past days. And Denmark recognizes that we cannot ignore the challenges. Extreme weather events this summer are clear testimony to that. So Denmark decided to give a new contribution of 100 million Danish kroner to help people in most need through support to climate adaptation and concrete activities to avert, minimize, and address climate-induced loss and damage. This is not about changing the international discourse on loss and damage. It's not about legal responsibilities and compensation. We're talking about finding the right means to help the most vulnerable people who suffer most from the consequences of climate change. But Dr. Lailufard Yasmin also mentioned the visit of our development minister here earlier this year and how he saw a very changed Bangladesh. But he actually came to see in the first line of defense, so to speak, the people most in need. We traveled both to Cox's Bazar, but also to Satkhira, and really to those people living with saltwater intrusion, cyclones, prawn farms, and the like. And he wanted to do that to start talking about climate loss and damage. We need to open that discussion. It does not mean that Denmark will lead a new pillar among mitigation and adaptation, but it means that we are not afraid to open the discussion on loss and damage, which will be a big one during the upcoming COP27, as we all know, and which needs to be taken. It's been kind of a stalemate between developed and developing countries over the past COPs. So we want to see ourselves as a bridge builder and start opening that dialogue. Thank you very much. And if Bangladesh can access those 100 million Danish kroner, I think we already are preparing a program for our development cooperation in Bangladesh, very much with the focus on adaptation and prevention of loss and damage, and also a little bit on mitigation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone, ambassadors, discussants. This has been an extremely stimulating discussion. We have learned a lot, and I think that when the contents of these deliberations are known to the rest of our community, I mean, the relations between your countries, the Nordic countries and Bangladesh, would even grow even closer in terms of collaboration. There is indeed a lot to learn from Scandinavia. I mean, I've been very deeply involved with your part of the world, and I really think, and I look to working together in order to do the very same things that I had said initially, that it would, I think, relationship with the Nordic countries would certainly improve the quality of life of each and every Bangladeshi, whether it be governments or the civil society, the media, a lot to take lessons from. Not everybody is perfect, of course. I mean, and I had mentioned the Viking times. Maybe we're less than perfect during the Viking times, but there was also the Nibelungen saga where I thought the Nordic role was very positive at that point in time. But anyway, thank you so much for the discussions today, and also because I realized that there was some exchange of, messages back and forth on the schedules. But I think that, ambassadors, you have cooperated extremely well with this effort of ours, this modest effort. And thank you so much for that. I will now hand over, pass the mic. The deliberations are officially closed, of course, but Mr. Inayatullah Khan, the chairman of Cosmos, to give his final concluding remarks. Mr. Khan.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Iftikhar Chaudhry. You have done an excellent job in chairing and moderating this session. I want to thank the distinguished speakers, all the three ambassadors. I think all of you have done a wonderful job in explaining Bangladesh, Nordic ties and the potentials, and also the discussants, Professor Imtiaz and Laila, for both of you have really added so much knowledge into the potential of untapped potential, I would say. And in fact, after listening to this past 2 hours of deliberation, I'm very confident that our relations will grow, because I see there are a lot of scope for collaboration. And first and foremost is the climate collaboration. And I'm a conservationist, and I'm an ocean activist. I deal with oceans, Bay of Bengal being the largest bay in the world. I was just talking to Anna, the first secretary from Swedish Embassy, and I couldn't stop. I said that I just came from Sundarban. That was like 3-4 days ago, and I spent a few days there. And she said, "Oh, I was there and I saw a tiger." And then she sent me the picture of a tiger. In fact, she was very lucky, and she was in fact with our wild team members, and that she went. And so there's a huge, I think, scope to collaborate on climate issues, on gender issue, human freedom, media freedom. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, that Nordic values are values to be cherished, and Bangladesh can learn much from the Nordic experience. In tackling and the climate, the challenges of climate change. I mean, we're talking about Ukraine conflict and COVID crisis, but I think the climate change, the devastation and catastrophe that will bring in, will be much, much larger than the combined effect of Ukraine conflict and the COVID crisis. So I think there's a huge potential to learn from the Nordic experience and expertise, and I hope that we will have a follow-up in-person session early next year. Bangladesh Nordic potential, and I hope we'll have a face-to-face. And we would like to publish. In fact, my publishing, the Cosmos Publishing, would like to publish something between Nordic and Bangladesh relationship. I would be very happy if we can bring out something to celebrate our 50 years of our friendship. So let's work on that, and we will also celebrate sometime in October. We'll be writing to three of you. Maybe we'll celebrate one evening the Nordic Bangladesh event, where we will celebrate on behalf of the Cosmos Foundation. And by the time this dialogue that has taken right now, it will be transcribed, and it will be getting a very wide publicity across the social media and the mainstream media. And on that note, and also I want to thank our digital team and Nahar and Nabila, who have worked behind the scene to make this webinar a grand success. I think it has gone very well. So, and I thank everybody. And on that note, I would wish everybody good luck and good health, and see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.